At the beginning of the movie, we meet our protagonist, a shoe designer named Drew Baylor. We see him entering the main building of the company he works for. Several people are giving him a bad look like he's done something wrong. He is greeted by his girlfriend, Ellen, who escorts him to the CEO's office. While heading to the office, we get a flashback of what happened that got Drew into this situation. We find out that he's responsible for designing a controversial shoe, one that he thought would become the company's bestseller. He even missed Christmas dinner with his family, just to finish working on that specific shoe. At that point, he thought that what he designed was going to be the company's best product. We even see him celebrate with his co-workers during the launch of the brand new shoes, something that he believes simulates the feeling of walking on clouds. Back to the present, Drew arrives at the waiting area in front of the CEO's office. He takes a moment to notice how the secretaries look at him. He believes he knows how to spot when someone is giving him a look that indicates they will no longer be meeting. Right there, he knows that everyone is giving him that look. Drew enters the office and is greeted by the CEO, Phil. The boss reveals that their company is about to lose $972 million because of Drew's failed design. Phil shows Drew all the side projects that must be terminated because of the fiasco. This includes a basketball team and an organization dedicated to helping the environment. As they continue their walk in the building, Phil continues to emphasize the severity of their financial loss. When Drew asks what he can do to make up for his mistake, Phil asks him to go downstairs and meet a reporter. The CEO wants him to own up to his screw-up in front of the press. He has no other choice but to comply with Phil. Drew leaves the building without a job and heads home, defeated. Upon arriving home, he started building a contraption that will end. As he adjusts the machine and prepares to turn it on, he receives a call from his sister. Drew finds out from his distressed sister that their father has just passed away. Drew's father had a heart attack while visiting Kentucky. His sister wants him to help with the aftermath, because he is seen as the responsible sibling, capable of handling what needs to be done. Drew is silent for a few seconds before getting off his machine. In the next scene, we see Drew together with his sister and mother at the airport. They discuss what Drew should do upon arriving in Kentucky. The mother mentions that he might have difficulty getting along with his father's side of the family. His mother also worries about all of the things she needs to take care of, now that she is a widow. Drew promises to bring his father's body back to their home, no matter what. What his family doesn't know is that Drew plans to attempt the unthinkable act again, after he completes this task. On the plane, we see that Drew is the only passenger. The flight attendant, Claire, approaches him and offers him a free seat in first class. She insists that it would make her job easier if he sits at the front, so he complies with her request. Later, Claire approaches Drew again to make small talk. He tells her where he's going, but doesn't reveal the fact that his father is deceased. When Claire finds out that he is going to Elizabethtown, she draws a map for him, since the place is hard to navigate. Claire keeps talking, even though Drew is clearly trying to get some rest. Drew ends up telling Claire about his relationship with Ellen, and about being fired from his job. After they finish getting acquainted, Claire leaves Drew alone so he can get some sleep. While sleeping, Drew dreams about his fond memories of his father. Unfortunately, the dream quickly becomes a nightmare, after images of his recent failure flash into his mind. Upon waking up, he gets ready to disembark the plane. Claire hands him a coupon and offers some words of encouragement. At the airport, Claire shows up again, just to remind Drew of the directions to get to Elizabethtown. Judging by the way she interacts and looks at Drew so far, it's fair to say she likes him. In the next scene, we see Drew driving to his destination. He calls his uncle, Dale, to let him know he'll be arriving soon. Unfortunately, despite having a map Claire gave him, he still ends up lost. After letting out his frustration, Drew continues driving and eventually finds his way to Elizabethtown. When he arrives, he finds it odd that a lot of people are waving at him. He also sees a sign that mentions his late father. The people there make him feel like a celebrity. Later that day, he meets up with his cousin, Jesse Baylor, who gives him a warm hug. Jesse and Drew head to the nearby cemetery, where they meet his uncles. One of his uncles claims that the Baylor clan already reserved a plot in the cemetery where Drew's father, Mitch, will be buried. Drew points out that the decision of where to bury his father is still up in the air. He is considering the possibility of cremation. This comes as a surprise to them, since they've always considered a burial as the only way to honor Mitch. Later, Drew is introduced to the rest of his relatives inside the chapel. The room is filled with people of all ages. All of them seem curious to hear from him. Unaware of the proper customs, he gives them his condolences. Fortunately, Jesse pulls Drew aside and points out that the relatives are the ones who should be giving condolences to him, not the other way around. When Drew approaches his father's coffin, he is intrigued by Mitch's expression. He takes a few seconds to find the words to describe what he's seeing. After thinking hard, he finally realizes that his father looks whimsical, even at the end of his life. Drew hesitates at first, but decides to hold his father's hands to show respect. In the next scene, Drew meets more of his relatives. He goes from person to person, trying his best to socialize. However, it's obvious that meeting all these people is making him feel exhausted and awkward. At one point, we see Jesse's son, Samson, make a scene by throwing food on the floor and being an overall nuisance. As if the social atmosphere isn't exhausting enough, a kid running wild inside the house makes the situation worse. Later, one of Drew's aunts shows him some pictures of his distant relatives who are no longer around. She tells him some random facts that he could hardly give a damn about, but he pretends to listen out of respect. She also hands him a picture of his father, which was taken 3 days before the incident. Drew takes a good hard look at the photos, still processing the fact that his dad is no longer around. The next sequence of scenes focuses on giving more context about the Baylors. One of Drew's younger relatives is a fan of his work. He even asks him for a signed shoe. The boy has no idea about Drew's current circumstances. Meanwhile, we see Jesse in one corner being scolded by his father. Jesse's father believes that Samson is being raised the wrong way. However, Jesse thinks that he is breaking away from the traditional ways of raising a child. Well, considering the events earlier at the gathering, Jesse's parenting style doesn't seem impressive. After getting away from the crowd, Drew spends some time with his cousin. They talk about life updates, and Jesse brings up being a drummer in his band. Jesse also starts singing out of the blue. As a result, Samson screams on the other side of the room, not liking his father's singing. The entire day so far seems like a fever dream for Drew, except it's not. This is his reality now. He has to deal with weird relatives in a small town, after becoming a failure in his previous job. His mental health was already in a bad spot prior to arriving in Elizabethtown, and nothing is making it better at this point. One would think that Drew's day couldn't get any weirder. When he checks in at a hotel, he finds out that the whole place is rented out by a couple that will soon be married. Everyone in the hotel is partying. Still, he tries his best to act as if nothing is out of the ordinary. In his room, Drew tries to call his sister and his girlfriend. He's desperate to talk to anyone normal. He tries to watch TV to pass the time, but all of the shows are too violent. Even the commercial show that features a knife makes him feel uncomfortable. He then tries calling Claire. He sends a voicemail telling her he needs someone to talk to. Moments later, someone finally calls Drew back. It's his sister telling him about his mother, who is currently trying to cook, but is failing at it. While talking to his sister, he receives another call, this time from Claire. He puts her on hold for a while so he can continue talking with his sister. However, this time he receives another call from his girlfriend, Ellen. Drew ends up juggling 3 calls at once. To sum it all up, Drew's conversation with her sister revolves around reconsidering the decision to cremate his father. His conversation with Ellen involves them clarifying where their relationship is at. Ellen breaks up with Drew, but reassures him that she is still his friend, whom he can talk to if he wants. Lastly, Drew's conversation with Claire revolves around ranting about his weird relatives. After ending the call with his sister and ex-girlfriend, Drew ends up having a long phone conversation with Claire. They end up talking all night about random problems. They share deep thoughts and give each other their opinions on their respective problems. That night, Drew decides to walk around the hotel. He spots an open room and steals a bottle of alcohol from the bathtub. He gets spotted by the room's occupant, Chuck. He is also the person who rented the entire hotel, the one who's getting married soon. Chuck is ready to confront Drew. However, that changes when Drew admits that he's not there to attend the wedding, but to attend his father's funeral. Chuck becomes sympathetic and cries in front of Drew. This allows Drew to distract Chuck from the fact that he is trying to steal alcohol from him. Drew even passes his phone to Chuck, and the man exchanges a few words with Claire. At the end of the interaction, Chuck and Drew become well acquainted. When Drew gets back to his room, he is still on a phone call with Claire. They discuss some vague concepts and personal philosophies. Claire tries to call it a night, but Drew asks when they can meet again. Claire thinks that maybe their conversations are fun because it's on the phone, and talking in person might be different. At this point, it's already around 3 in the morning. Since they've already been talking for so long, they decide to forego sleep and meet each other to watch the sunrise. Despite not getting an ounce of sleep, both Drew and Claire successfully drive to their destination without getting into an accident. They meet in the middle of the road before the sun is up. Just as predicted, when they actually meet in person, they run out of words to say. Moments later, Drew and Claire go their separate ways. We find out that Claire is heading to Hawaii. She gives Drew a stare that he thinks is a look that people give to someone they'll never see again. He thinks that it will be the last time they'll see each other. Later that day, Drew calls his mother, asking if she is sure about the decision to cremate his father. Instead of answering, his mother starts talking about all the new things she tried doing in the past few days. She is even in a dance class during the call. Drew becomes more agitated by the second. He wants to hear her answer so he can finish his tasks as soon as possible. When Drew mentions that one of the people managing the funeral services is a guy named Bill Banyan, his mother becomes infuriated. She mentions that Bill is a con artist that tried to swindle Mitch in the past. Drew doesn't care about this, he just wants to know if his mother is still sure about cremation. She tells him that since Bill is involved, then her stance on cremation remains firm. Back at the hotel, Drew receives a call from Claire. He asks her how her trip to Hawaii went. This is when Claire shows up, revealing that she never went away. When Drew asks why she's there, she reveals that she's there to make sure he doesn't feel lonely. Moments later, we see Claire help Drew pick out an urn for his father's ashes. We also see them walking around Elizabethtown, having fun. It almost seems like a normal date, except for the fact that, at one point, they are at the cemetery for some reason, laughing and being silly. Still, regardless of the setting, they look like a happy couple. Later that night, while walking to Drew's hotel, Claire talks about how they both have one thing in common. She thinks that they are the type of people who are accustomed to being in second place. Claire cites the example of her own relationship, of how her boyfriend prioritizes his academic pursuits first, and how he is never around. She also alludes to her being a temporary person that is keeping Drew company while he's in Elizabethtown. Before parting ways, they almost kiss each other, but hold themselves back. Claire takes this as a sign that they can foster a platonic friendship moving forward. Drew doesn't know how to interpret the situation, but his mind is too occupied with something else to worry about defining his relationship with Claire. In the next scene, Drew is discussing the plans for the funeral service with his uncles and Bill. This is happening while there are a bunch of kids screaming in the other room. The older gentlemen keep asking Drew why he doesn't agree to bury Mitch in Elizabethtown. At one point, Drew gets fed up with the discussion, so he asserts himself. He tells everyone at the table that his father will be cremated according to the wish of his mother, and that decision is final. Surprisingly, his declaration is met with laughter instead of disagreement, because of a slight mistake he made in his speech. Still, this confirms they respect his decision on the matter. For a short while, Drew goes to the other room, where the noisy kids are. He puts on a VHS tape and shows the kid a video of a demolition man blowing up a house. The kids become silent while watching the video, and everyone else in the house appreciates Drew for doing that. Drew knows that his cousin, Jesse, is not equipped to make a bunch of kids, including his own, behave. This is why he brought the VHS tape as a gift. It's a tool that will help keep Samson under control. Later that night, we see Drew lounging about with the other men, relaxing. He's happy that they've finally resolved the matter of what to do with his dad's remains. However, after staring at the fire on the stove for a few seconds, Drew suddenly decides to head over to the crematorium in the middle of the night to stop the cremation process. Unfortunately, once he gets there, it's too late. A man hands him the urn containing his father's ashes. Later, Drew takes the urn back to the hotel with him. He sees Claire in the lobby, hanging out with the bride and the bridesmaids. When she sits down with Drew, he asks her about her boyfriend, Ben. She tells him about an excuse that her boyfriend gave her for not being able to come and see her. Moments later, Drew and Claire move to a different room. They arrive at an empty hall that was for the reception. This is where Claire summons the courage to confess her feelings for Drew. He doesn't know how to respond, so he just changes the topic. Claire then starts talking about being hungry and enumerates all the food that she's craving. At one point they head out of the reception hall, but they go back after realizing that they left the urn. During their conversation, Drew suddenly starts talking smack about Claire's boyfriend. He thinks that Ben shouldn't leave a girl waiting. This is when he kisses Claire to demonstrate what her boyfriend should have been doing at that time. He tells her that she deserves someone to make her happy, but also points out he's not the person to do that. After making sure their boundaries are clear, they resume kissing, savoring every second of it. The next morning, Claire prepares to leave Drew's hotel room. She tries to make loud noises to let him know she's going away, but Drew is in deep slumber. She gives him a few more seconds to try and wake up, but nothing happens. Claire leaves the room and exits the hotel, while a large crowd claps and cheers. They think she got laid the night before. When Claire is finally walking away from the hotel building, Drew catches up to her, telling her to wait for him. She assumes that he is there to confess his feelings, and that he will reciprocate the affection. Unfortunately, he starts ranting about how he failed at his previous job. He uses this as an excuse for why he cannot commit to any relationship at the moment. Claire lets him know that she doesn't give a damn whether he is a failure. It's clear that Drew cares more about his career mistake than any potential romance. Claire gives Drew some words of encouragement. Then, before leaving, she makes it clear that there's nothing going on between them. Fast forward several days, and it's finally time for Mitch's memorial service. Drew's sister and mother arrive at the venue, and most of the relatives can't help but watch them as they head to their table. Eventually, the program commences, and various individuals take to the podium to deliver speeches about Mitch, one after the other. After everyone else finishes their speech, the final person to take the stage is Drew's mother, Holly Baylor. Holly begins the speech by talking about her anxieties around Mitch's relative. She believes that everyone sees her as the woman who took him away. She then tells everyone about how she and Mitch met, which is how their love story began. At this point, the audience is mostly silent, until Holly starts talking about what she's been up to for the past few days. As Holly goes into more detail about the struggles of her daily life, the audience starts to laugh. The crowd erupts in even more laughter when Holly mentions a story about her neighbor, Bob, getting a boner when he tried to comfort her. Overall, it's a weird speech, but it manages to bring joy to Mitch's relatives. Holly tap dances after the speech, leaving a positive impression on everyone watching. When Drew steps outside of the hall for a bit, he sees Claire. She gives him a box that contains a map. It's a gift that she made especially for him, one that he might want to use whenever he drives back home. Unfortunately, Claire can't stay for long, since she's going to see her boyfriend soon. This is when Drew questions her whether Ben is even a real person or if she's just making him up. Claire doesn't answer. Instead, she tells him to make use of the map properly and call her when he's home. The scene shifts back to the memorial hall, and we see Jesse and his band playing a song, and the crowd is enjoying their performance. The stagehand releases a large prop dove that zip lines across the hall. However, the dove catches on fire, which makes most of the crowd panic. When the dove crashes to the ground, everyone runs out of the hall. The sprinklers turn on, and at that moment, Drew and Claire give each other a knowing stare, one that conveys a bittersweet feeling. The next day, the family holds a burial for Mitch. However, instead of his ashes, they put his favorite suit and other memorabilia in the coffin instead. After the burial, Drew gets in his car and prepares to drive back home. He opens the box containing Claire's gift. He sees a meticulously prepared scrapbook containing maps, pictures, and detailed instructions on where to go and what to do at each destination. There is even a CD containing a playlist that Claire timed so it would play specific songs when Drew reaches specific places. At one point in the journey, Drew stops by a convenience store and spots a particular magazine. The cover shows the fiasco of his failed shoe design. He spends 5 minutes reading the article and wallowing in misery, but then he puts the magazine down and continues his journey. In some destinations, Drew takes some of his father's ashes and scatters them. It's like he's distributing the memory of Mitch in different beautiful places. Next, Drew stops by a diner and orders what Claire considers the best chili dish in the country. After that, he stops by a music store to listen to stories told by the store owner. He also goes to a hotel famous for being the last place Martin Luther King stayed before his assassination. This is another place where Drew spreads some of his father's ashes. The next sequence of scenes shows Drew stopping by various places where he and his father went in the past. We also see Drew head to a place surrounded by trees just to dance alone. Claire's notes mention doing that would help relieve stress and make him feel alive. At one point, Drew starts talking to the urn, addressing it as if he is talking to Mitch. Drew is glad that he followed Claire's instructions to take a road trip. Now he no longer plans to do the unthinkable when he gets home. He becomes emotional as he thinks about what he was planning to do before. The next day, Drew arrives at the world's second largest farmers market. Once he gets there, he follows a series of clues that leads him to make a decision. The last clue suggests that he can either head home and call it a day, or look for a girl wearing a red hat. Drew knows exactly who that girl is, and of course, he didn't come just to leave so abruptly. Drew runs forward and tries his best to spot Claire among the sea of people. It's no easy task. There are a lot of women wearing hats, and even a few wearing red ones. As the seconds go by, Drew feels like it's impossible to find Claire in such a dense crowd. However, just when he turns around to walk back, he finds Claire, and she gives him a warm smile. He runs to her, and they embrace each other tightly. Of course, the reunion won't be complete without a kiss.